Cloud. There we go. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for joining. So today's, oops, I'll have to escape to get some water in a little bit. I'm out. Today's session is it's a workshop on how to prepare for the short answer assessments, right? And it's in your interest to further develop your responses. Not only is this a good skill set to develop, because this is going to be ongoing through your college career, your professors are going to ask you to provide specific details directly related to the assigned content. And so that's what this is all about. But particularly for this course, just to appeal to your self-interest, let me remind you of this real quick. Let me go to the syllabus. And open that up a bit. I want to remind you guys of this right here as an incentive to really prepare your short answer assessments. Where is it? Right here. This little caveat here. Note, as an incentive to ensure your success in this course, if each unit earns at least an 85% by April 27th, the final exam will not be required to prepare for or complete, right? And so keep that in mind as an incentive that you really want to buttress up your responses, right? So it's conceivable to, the way I have the grades calibrated, to not do very well on the short answer assessments and still pass, but you want to be getting at least a 75 to 80% on these short answer assessments to take advantage of this incentive. And I'm sure it would be very helpful towards the end of the semester if, at least in this course, you didn't have to worry about a final exam, right? So keep that in mind. And with that said, okay, that was loud. There it is. Okay, I'll share this with you guys in the chat, but this is from, these are various student responses where students either earned 90% on their responses, a high 70%. This is about an 83%, right? It's just to give you a sense of what is required to earn, a better grade on your responses, right? And if you notice right here, it goes into a lot of detail. There's very specific information from the assigned content. So I'm going to go ahead and share this so you guys have it, right? And feel free, some of these questions you might have seen, feel free to use these as your notes. And if you want to take a reattempt for Unit 1, you're always able to do that at any time in the semester to get your Unit 1 grade at an 85% or higher, right? Okay, is that going to everyone? Yep, that's going to everyone. Okay, and then I wanted to bring this to your attention before we get into the workshop: short answer response directions and expectations. So when responding to short answer prompts, it is crucial to provide clear, concise, and accurate answers that directly, and let me change the word. I don't like the word answer. I don't know why I did that. Responses, right? There are no answers in history. It's responses that I'm looking for. So, and that's an important distinction. What's wrong there? Accurate. I wanted it plural. There. Okay. Accurate responses. Yeah. That directly addresses the questions being asked, right? So that's an important distinction, right? This is not a math class. There isn't a formula you're plugging in, right? So grades are based on a spectrum. And so if you provide a response that is a sentence or two with very few details, that's when you're going to get somewhere around a 35 or below, right? A 35 is a low C out of 50 points, right? So continuing on, your responses should demonstrate a thorough understanding of the assigned material by incorporating specific and relevant details. These details should include dates, right? So if you notice your response doesn't have any dates, you want to put in dates, right? Dates are important because it begins to give you kind of a mental timeline of cause and effect, when things happened back then and as they proceed forward. So you, by the end of the semester, I'm not requiring you to memorize dates, but you'll have at least some idea of how things that happened during Reconstruction would later affect people during the Industrial Age, during the Progressive Age, and things that happen in the Progressive Age are going to affect things in the during the Great Depression, and things that happened in World War II, right, affect things that happen in the Cold War. And just having at least an understanding of when the events of those topics happen as far as the year is concerned can help you develop a map of that, right? It's not the most important thing in history, but it's kind of the foundation to help you build upon a greater understanding of what is going on. Events, key individuals, geographical locations. So, really look at the question and, provide some information that can fortify it. Even if the question isn't directly asking you about key individuals, if you're getting a question about congressional reconstruction, for instance, it would be a good idea to bring up Thaddeus Stevens, who provided key leadership to ensure that the Civil Rights Act of 1866 was passed, the 14th Amendment of 1868 was ratified, the 15th Amendment of 1870. And when you let's say you're addressing a question like congressional reconstruction, and you're bringing up the 14th and 15th Amendment, take a sentence to fully explain what those amendments were, right? It only would take a sentence or two, but, the spectrum, for a low C would be one or two sentences, just rattling off maybe 13th, 14th Amendment, maybe some dates, but a more developed response is going to further elaborate on what you're writing about, to just demonstrate that to me that, yes, I really engaged with this material, and I dare you not to give me a high grade on this, right? That could be an attitude you can incorporate. Okay. So, and an explanation of the significance of the topic or the broader context of the course. Now, that's great if you can do that. That's a challenge, right? Especially, a lot of this stuff is new to you, but if you're able to demonstrate the significance of anything you're responding to, right? Explaining how the 14th and 15th Amendment were significant because this is the federal government telling the states, you cannot violate people's rights, right? I think Eric Foner talked about this, right? He talked about how the Bill of Rights, the first Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments were rights from the states basically telling the federal government not to mess with us, right? And then you get the 14th and 15th Amendment of the federal government coming in and saying, listen, yeah, you have your right to free speech, to religion, to protect yourself, to not incriminate yourself, but you don't have the right to violate people's rights based on race or condition of former servitude, right? So aim to write a minimum of 5 to 7 sentences, right? So you could still theoretically get a C with a couple of sentences, but 5 to 7 sentences is minimum to typically achieve a response that's going to get you an 80% or higher. To adequately convey your understanding, support your answers with evidence, right? Again, let me take that out. I don't know what I was thinking. There are no answers in history. Your response with evidence. Responses that lack sufficient detail or fail to reference the assigned content may receive a failing grade, right? Okay. So just to reiterate, directly address the question, right? So it's a good idea to rephrase the question in a statement. Ensure response specifically answers the question being asked. Demonstrate your understanding. Show how you have grasped the key concepts and information from the assigned material. Use your own words, right? And to explain the material, demonstrating your comprehension. Incorporate specific details, support your answer with concrete details from the assigned reading or lectures. We don't have lectures in this course, but you get the point. This could include names, dates, events, specific examples, right? You get the point there. Connect to broader context. Explain how specific topics you're addressing fit into the larger themes of historical context of the course, right? And this might be something available to you as we progress to the course. It's okay to harken back as we go forward in this class to things that happened in Reconstruction or the Industrial Age, when they remind you of things that are being asked about the Progressive Era or World War I or the 1920s, the Great Depression, World War II, or the Cold War. Minimum length, again, 5 to 7 sentences. And very important, to use quotes effectively. You should strive to quote from the reading. So if, I use the text, I'm taking parts of a textbook called Give Us Liberty by the historian Eric Foner. And so I include some videos by Eric Foner. Some of them are long, some of them are short, but that would be a good place to quote him. And then you always want to follow up your quote in your own words, explaining how this quote is relevant to the prompt or question you're being asked. Right? So keep that in mind and make sure you guys have this. It's available in the units, but I'll put it here so you guys have it. And let me know if there are any questions at this point. Anybody have any questions or just want me to clarify anything?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, what do we have? How many people do we have here? Let me stop.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah, where's my stop?
So for the sorry, for the examples of correct response, are we supposed to have those topics that it has? Like, is it just generated like that? Is that how our grade is based on?
Well, what I'm providing you is just a spectrum of students that responded to those questions from Reconstruction, right? So you have examples of students. So a lot of the responses I got were 1 to 2 sentences. And so I'm just giving you examples of students that typically got 45 out of 50 or 46 out of 50. And I also provided you examples of a student that provided a lot of details but got a 42. And other students that provided still a lot of details, but there were some things that were missing that got a high 70%. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. Okay. Why am I not getting the stop share thing here? Oh, here we go. Maybe if I do that. No. Okay. I don't know what's going on here. I'm trying to show myself into the camera, but it doesn't look like it's working. Are you guys seeing me?
Yeah, I could see you.
Yeah, I can see you.
All right. Okay, so what I wanted to do was see how many people do we have here? How do I?
It says 16, but I think you're one of them.
Okay. 16, so let's say 15. So let's just start with a couple of questions. So what I'm going to do is put you guys into break rooms, and these are questions. These questions that I provided you, where'd they go? Here we go. These I may share again. Share. Okay, I am sharing. Okay, share. Okay, there we go. All right, these questions that I provided you are questions that are in the next short answer assessment, right? So you guys are doing yourselves a good favor by being here because you're preparing for the short answer assessment. And so let's start with 3 questions, 3 of these prompts here. And I'm going to put you into break rooms for about 10 minutes. And I want you guys to work with each other. And the intention was that you guys looked at these questions and hopefully you prepared for some of these, but do your best to respond to these, and we'll come back and we'll talk about that. And if we have time, we can go over questions 4 and 5. So let's see here. What I'll do, so if you're in break room 1, this is the question you're going to be working on right here. And let me just put these 3 questions in the chat in case we have problems posting these questions in the chat room.
How do I get to the chat, sir? Where am I?
Down below, if you take your cursor down below, you'll see it, and then there's participants, chat, react, but chat is on the left side. Like that.
Let me see. I'm on my phone. I was trying to get it on my computer and I couldn't. So let's see.
Oh, it's telling me I've got too many words in the chat, so I'll take that one out. Okay, so there's the first 2. So the first 2 is dealing with the election of 1896 and 1892. And the third question that we will be doing break rooms in is examine the role of immigration in the growth of industrial cities from 1880 to 1920 and its impact on American culture. Okay, so let's see if I remember how to do this. Captions, no. Oh, breakout rooms. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to make 3 breakout rooms. So breakout room number 1 is going to be responding to the election of 1896. The election of 1892, and breakout 2 is going to be dealing with the election of 1892, and breakout 3 is going to be looking at the question, examine the role of immigration in the growth of industrial cities from 1890 to 1920 and its impact on American culture. So here we go, 2, 3. And what I will do too is provide a Google Doc so you guys can put your notes in there.
Sir, I don't know how to get to those chats.
That's what I'm trying to do. I'm going to try to get back on my computer.
I'm trying really hard, and I see that little icons, but I don't see what you might be looking at on your end.
Yeah, so somewhere on the phone, there might be some dots on the bottom. And so you want to slide your screen to the right, and you might be able to access the chat there, if I remember correctly, when I've used the phone before.
But what if you're on your laptop?
Oh, if you're on your laptop, just take your cursor down to the bottom of the screen, and then it'll pop up some options. And towards the left is the chat icon. It says chat, has like a quote bubble above it.
Yeah, yes.
And that should pop up the chat.
Yes, I can see the chat and everything you're posting, but I don't see the groups.
Oh yeah, I haven't set them up yet.
Oh, I was like, where are those groups? Okay, sorry.
No problem. Okay, new group 2. Okay, group. And share. Okay, so you guys are going to be put into the chats in just a second here. Just want to get these documents ready for you guys to put in your notes, and go ahead and put your names on them when it is available to you. And I'll put you in the chats, and then I'll jump in and post these once it is available. So I got 3. Assign automatically. Here we go. So I'll see you guys on the other side. Here we go. Okay, can I post something in here yet? No, okay. Open all rooms. Okay, so you guys are going to get placed into your breakout rooms in just a second here. Resume recording. Okay, here we go. All right. So I'll put this, what do we got here? Group 1, Group 2, Group 3. Okay, immigration. So I'll go ahead and just put this in the chat. So this is the question, and here is the response from the group chat. There we go. Okay. So this is what we're working with right here. It automatically numbered it. So that's the number 1 is the question and number 2 is the response, right? So, okay. So taking a look at what we have here, examine the role of immigration in the growth of industrial cities from 1880 to 1920 and its impact on American culture. So the response here is immigration saw a rapid increase during 1880 to 1920 as many people, 3.5 million immigrants. Actually, it was more than that, right? From the chapter, it indicates 25 million. So take note of that. From all over the world, coming from places like Russia, Italy, Asia, right? Yeah, Eastern Europe as well. So, Austria, Hungary, Romania, which is important to understand too, especially Eastern Europeans that are coming. These people are wildly different than your run-of-the-mill white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And so it's going to cause a lot of problems, right? This is kind of natural, kind of a bad tendency of human beings. Instead of inviting differences, we kind of get repulsed by differences. And it's not just an American thing, just any society where the dominant culture is receiving immigrants, the rank and file people within the dominant culture. In the case of America, it's white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, WASPs, are going to have a very difficult time with that. And it's going to give rise to nativist impulses that will eventually, by the time we get to the 1920s, give rise to the second wave of the KKK. So the first rise of the KKK was obviously their target were African Americans, newly freed people. Second wave of the KKK still doesn't like Black people, but their main target is going to go after Eastern Europeans, Catholics, socialists. There was, in Europe, there was a lot of labor organization. Socialism was quite popular in Europe. And so those immigrants are going to bring that with them. And so it's going to cause a lot of problems like that. People saw this as an advantage to put immigrants to labor. And yeah, so really understand the significance of this. So on the one hand, immigrants are coming for opportunities, right? There's lots of problems in Europe. It's war torn. There's a lot of poverty. And so people are leaving Europe for better opportunities. Why are immigrants being invited to the United States, do you believe?
To come and work,
Yeah, not just to work though. I mean, yeah, absolutely to work, but cheap labor, right, is what.
Okay, yeah.
Right,
Right.
cheap labor.
Cheap labor is always the impulse for immigration.
And
so
cheap labor was 20 cents an hour?
it could be, if that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it just depended on the industry that they were working in. It wasn't much. It wasn't much to survive on. The conditions are horrible. They're very dangerous, right? This is before there is any kind of government regulation. And so this is definitely way before OSHA, right? Now, if you work in a factory, there's certain standards to make sure that the workers are safe, right? If you work on a construction site, by the mandate of the federal government, you got to wear a hard hat, right? If you work in a factory, there's all sorts of requirements for the factory owner to make sure the workers are safe. None of that is true at all. You get hurt in the job, there's nothing that you can fall back on, right? There's no disability. And obviously medical care is pretty crude. And so breaking an arm could probably leave you with a a maimed arm for the rest of your life, and then good luck getting a job after that, right? To labor places such as factories, railroads, farms, mining, alongside immigrants, women and children were put to work to help financially support their families. Yeah, child labor is rampant. There's no child labor laws. So literally children 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 are working in textile factories. There was a woman by the name of Mary Harris Jones that went by Mother Jones. She was a little thing, right? Smaller than me, right? I would look down on her. I'm a short guy, right? She was a little old lady, but she championed children working in factories. She also championed miners as well, and brought a lot of attention to child labor and the plight of miners in coal mines, and did a lot of work to organize these people. And then alongside immigrants, women and children, this brought many labor unions such as the AFL, American Federation of Labor, excellent, to immigrants to advocate for their workers' rights. The AFL of Labor, led by Samuel Gompers, excellent, advocated for an 8-hour working day, right? Better conditions and higher wages. So this is the beginning. This is the beginning of the movement for the 8-hour day that we're not going to see until we get, there'll be some progress during the progressive era for that, but the courts will push back against that. And we won't really see the 8-hour workday until we get to the 1930s, right? So as terrible as working conditions are today, and there's much to improve, understand that at the very least, having an 8-hour workday wasn't just given to workers. It came from a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And indeed, a lot of people were killed during this. There was absolute warfare between labor and capital during this time. Some other things that you can add, you might want to take notes on this. So let's just see. So so during this time period, 1880 to 1920, and this is kind of the industrial age at its apex, industrial capitalism was an important factor that drew immigrants to the United States. And again, during this time frame, 25 million immigrants came to the United States. So really appreciate that. I mean, that's an enormous amount of people. The population is increasing by up to 15, 16, 17% in the United States at this time. It's going to be hard to deal with that, even with the best intentions, for city planners, governors, presidents, senators, and in many cases, their intentions weren't that good. So the influx of immigrants alongside a large movement of Americans from the countryside to the city helped propel the rapid growth of cities like New York, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Milwaukee, St. Louis. And yeah, this is seeing these cities quadruple and even higher, doubling, quadrupling. So they're seeing influx of their population rising up to as much as 50%. So it's creating a lot of slums, tenement housing. So people are basically living in one-room apartments, families in rat-infested apartments, basically, with no, barely a window, definitely no plumbing. And so just kind of appreciate that. Imagine what the streets of New York must have smelt like, because where do you think they're going to the bathroom? They're going to the bathroom in buckets and dumping it out the window, right? Disease is rampant, right? People are dying of dysentery. Measles is rampant. TB is, which is interesting. Have you guys been watching the news about TB?
Mm-hmm.
It's on the rise, right? Keep
Yep.
yourself healthy. Make sure you're getting some sunlight. Make sure you're getting rest. I know that's easy for me to say as you guys are slaving away as students, but things are getting weird out there, right? And indeed, it's you don't need to take a history class. There's a lot of parallels to what's going on right now to the time period that we're studying right here, the Gilded Age, the age of the robber barons, right? Where the At this time, the millionaires were in control. Now the billionaires, today, billionaires are in complete control. That's referred to as an oligarchy, right? So these people like Carnegie, Rockefeller, Andrew Mellon, these people are referred to as robber barons. They're accumulating all of the wealth that is being generated to the top, right? And interesting questions are being asked by a lot of labor unions, right? And one of the questions that they're asking is and see if you can answer this. Where does wealth come from? Where does wealth come from in the industrial age? Or where does it come from always? Whether you're talking about the agricultural industries, factories.
It's capitalism.
Yeah, but specifically, where is the wealth within capitalism come from?
They are pretty much making money off the people by selling and
Well, we'll pause there. From the people, right?
yeah, right.
Who's generating the wealth for the capitalists?
The rich.
No, not the rich. Who's generating? How is Rockefeller making millions and millions of dollars and creating monopolies and completely cornering the market? How is he becoming so rich and powerful? Where is he getting his wealth from?
Was he the railroad?
Yeah, he was oil.
Oil.
Cheap labor.
Labor, right? It comes from workers, right? If he has no workers, he has no money.
That's
and
true.
So what a robber baron does, or a CEO does, or an owner of business does, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's what a business is, right? You organize labor and you extract the wealth that they generate and you put it in your pocket, and then you throw them as little as possible to maintain productivity, right? This is what labor unions are trying to address and saying, yeah, it's cool that Rockefeller's making a bunch of money. He's obviously talented, he's innovated, but why is it that none of this wealth is being fairly shared with the actual people that are generating the wealth, right? And this is true throughout history, right? If you think about plantation owners, where did they get all their wealth from? The slaves, right? Without the slaves, the plantation owners are not rich white men living in big houses throughout the South, right? Yeah, by 1890, take note of this. This is a good little factoid from the chapter. Immigrants and their children accounted for roughly 60% of the population in most large cities, right? So this is a problem, right? And all sorts of things are being learned at this time. This is, there was a time when, like, before 1873, I think, before the Great Chicago Fire, firehouses, right? Firefighters, those were private companies, right? And so if you own like a house or an apartment or a business, you would go to your local fire department and buy like an emblem and put it out on the sidewalk. And if your house or your business or your apartment caught on fire, they would see, okay, this person paid, we'll put out the fire. You see the problem with this, though? Right? Fire spreads. And so the Great Chicago burnt the entire, it's like the LA fire today, even worse. All of Chicago burnt to the ground because not everybody could afford having a this fire service. So this is I'm bringing that up because this is the time where city planners are beginning to realize that, oh, we need to tax people and generate capital amongst the citizens so we can provide sanitation, police, fire department, health, right? That kind of thing. Okay. Many immigrants, especially from Italy and the Balkans, which is Eastern Europe, always intended to return home with enough money to purchase land. But the problem is they never made enough money. So they basically stayed. Immigrants from specific countries and often even specific communities, often clustered together in ethnic neighborhoods, right? And so you have these kind of enclaves of, Italy towns, Balkan towns, Romanian towns, China towns, and a lot of crime, right? And then gangs would be there kind of to defend their little enclaves. They formed vibrant organizations and societies to ease the transition to the new American home. Immigrant communities published newspapers in dozens of languages and so this is kind of getting, yeah, there were a lot of newspapers being published. So this is getting to, how did it impact American culture, right? There is an influx of newspapers, art, language is shaping culture as well. And the traditions, right? They're bringing their food, they're bringing their clothing, they're bringing their particular way. A lot of these are Christians, but their particular flavor of Christianity, and it's influencing all sorts of aspects of American culture. The rise of cities, the evolution of American immigration, the transformation of American labor, the further making of mass culture, and the creation of a greater concentration of wealth, the growth of vast city slums, the conquest of the West. That's important to understand too. A lot of these immigrants are going to be purposely brought from Eastern Europe to settle the West, right? The settlement of the West isn't just we're sending people to the West because that's where you're going to get opportunities. It's a matter of national security for the boys in Washington. If you think about the Mexican-American War, Mexico lost 2/3 of its land, northern Mexico, to the United States. They invited that kind of antagonism. They didn't deserve it, but they invited it because northern Mexico wasn't very populated. And Americans were all kind of ginned up on this concept of manifest destiny. God has opened up this land so we can spread our institutions of democracy and education and technology and capitalism. And there's gold out there. And so millions of Americans are going in there. That wasn't enough. So they are bringing in immigrants from Eastern Europe to settle that area. Because at this time, still, Russia is in Alaska and parts of Canada. England still has Washington and Oregon. This is in the 1840s, right? If we don't populate that land, you got Spain also in South America still. Those empires can come in and take what is now Western United States, right? So they needed people out there so they could, so not only could they claim that area, they could put power to that area. If you have your population out there, then that's actual power. So the triumph of big businesses, winding equalities. Yeah, okay. So yeah, just kind of make sure you have some of those details that were just mentioned, the population, the places they went to, like New York, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Milwaukee, St. Louis, the West. Immigrants are accounting for 60% of the population in many of these northern cities, which is a big problem. And this is causing all sorts of problems for sanitation, basic city functions of firefighting, police, and all of this kind of thing. Okay, excellent. So let's move on to, we'll do group 2 because that's the election of 1892. So I'm going to put this in the chat as well. Okay. Oh, there's too many words. Let's see what happens. Okay, I'll put this in 2 sections. There we go. Okay, and then here's the rest of it. Okay, some good stuff there. Okay, so okay, election 1892. Okay. So the candidates for the election of 1892 was Grover Cleveland, excellent, who was the Democrat, and who was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms up until the current president, President Trump. Former Republican President Benjamin Harrison, whose wife died right before the elections. The election marked the rise of the Populist Party. Yeah, that's an interesting party. This is, take note on this. This is the Populist Party. This is made up of labor, workers, farmers. Also, it was biracial. There was a time period where both white and black farmers began to realize that, oh, the big cats, right, the robber barons, the people that control the economy have just pitted us against each other. So we're distracted and they're taking all the money. And so there was a lot of cooperation biracially with the Populist Party. It's going to get up, the machine, the machine of the politics between the Republicans and the Democrats are going to destroy this party. But the significance of this party is it lays the foundations for the next unit we're going to be taking a look at, the progressive era, which begins to address a lot of the problems of the Industrial Revolution, the rise of monopolies, of dangerous working conditions, of child labor, right? And so we'll get to that, but understand the seeds of that are from the Populist Party. Yeah, okay. And you guys, I stole your thunder, which influenced future progressive reform, the era reform. So that's, understand this is, and I'll put this, that is from the progressive era is from basically 1901 to 1917. So that's coming in the future era. You might want to jot that down in your notes as well. That's what the Populist Party is going to give rise to. Was represented by James B. Weaver to assist with public ownership of railroads and telegraphs, which is pretty radical, right? Basically taking it out from the private sector and putting it into the public sector. This is socialism. The national and global landscape during this election was that the US was facing economic challenges, including labor unrest and dissatisfaction. Farmers and laborers were struggling, leading to the rise of the Populist Party as a political force. Globally, economic instability affected trade, making tariff policies a major campaign issue. Yeah, isn't that interesting? This is something that continues to come up, right? And how high were tariffs at this time? Did anyone take note of that?
25%?
25 to up to 50%, right?
Okay.
And this is something that we see, this is worth talking about, right? Tariffs are a nice tool for governments to have, right? It's a way of generating revenue. And as long as they're around 3 to 5%, it keeps people happy, right? And on some occasions too, you have targeted tariffs. So let's say, for instance, here in the United States, we want to help solar panels within the United States flourish. So it would make sense maybe to put a 25% tariff on foreign solar panels coming into the United States to give a buffer for that. But you got to be careful with that. It leads to tariff wars. It's an obvious thing that other countries, well, you put a tariff on us, we'll put a tariff on you. And it gives rise to higher prices because absolutely, and basically a tariff isn't really taxing another country, it's taxing the distributor. So if you're an American distributor going to the ports or to the border and you're accepting Chinese goods, Canadian goods, Mexican goods, that's the person, that's the company, the distributor that pays the tariff. And they just take that tariff and go, okay, we're just going to put it on the purchase price for this product for the consumer. They also, right now, like if you're following the news on the proposed tariffs towards Canada, there's a nationwide boycott for all American goods right now.
Yep.
They're not very happy about this, even though there's a pause on it. And if you go to the stores, there's reports in the stores that they're putting all of the American products on the top shelf and all the Canadian products right at eye level, and specifically labeling American, Canadian. And so there's a nationalist movement now in Canada because of the antagonism. So tariffs are always a dicey prospect. That it's not always bad, but it's sort of like a gas pedal. You have to know when to accelerate and when to take your foot off of the gas. But yeah, it happened. This will happen in the 1920s too. Tariffs are going to be up to 1,000%, right? It's insane. It's going to be the leading cause towards the Great Depression. Okay, the national and global landscape during the election was the U.S. was facing challenges. Okay, farmers were struggling, leading to the Populist Party globally. Economic instability affected trade, making tariff policies major. Electoral votes, excellent, were crucial, with Cleveland having 277 votes, Benjamin Harris right behind with 145. The populace had only 22, right? So Cleveland would become president. So yeah, just to make sure everything's clear here. So Grover Cleveland, the Democratic Party, is arguing for lower tariffs. He believed that the McKinley tariff was too high. This was a bill passed by McKinley when he was in Congress. It was named after him. The gold standard was a conservative financial policy. He wanted to revisit that. States' rights on voting rights, oppose federal intervention in Southern voting and practices. So do you guys find this interesting that, so he's a Democrat and he's for states' rights, which translates to, we don't want to help Black people, right? We don't want to help non-white people in general, right? So the Democrat, in many ways, at least socially back then, was the conservative party, right? Economically, at this time, they're becoming more liberal, right? They're wanting to help workers and farmers, but they're pitting whites and Blacks against each other. They want to help white workers at the expense of Black workers or Mexican workers, right? This is a white man's land for white people, is kind of their stance. That, you know, and this goes back to the Civil War and Reconstruction. That's going to change by the time we get, it begins to change slowly after World War II and kind of picks up steam in the 1960s. And by the 1980s, we see a switch, right? The Democrat Party becomes not only liberally, economically liberal, wanting to help out workers, but also socially liberal, advocating for rights for marginalized communities like Mexican Americans, Black Americans, and any other marginalized community. We don't have time to go into, it's interesting. Maybe at a later date, we can go into why that changed, but it's kind of interesting. But for purposes of time, we'll leave it at that. Benjamin Harris, just to make sure you guys have notes on this, argued for higher tariffs. He supported the McKinley tariff to protect, you know, the argument is to protect American manufacturers. He supported the Sherman silver purchase, a compromise to a nod to bimetallism, and bimetallism again is the use of both gold and silver. And you understand why they're beginning to question the gold standard, especially from the Populist Party? Did you get a sense of that from the reading or any of your guys' discussion? Because eventually by the 1930s, we're going to get off the gold standards, we'll return it. And by 1969, we're completely off the gold standard. Like, our money is not based on any commodity. It's based on the strength and the confidence of the U.S. economy exclusively. You know, the reason, and this is important to understand, because there are some issues when we have fiat currency. That's fiat currency is currency that's not backed by anything. But the reason why we got off the gold standard is if your money is based on a commodity like gold, well, then it's subject. Inflation and deflation is subject to supply and demand of gold, right? And by the 1870s, gold has been concentrated in very few hands. And so they've cornered the market. And so they're able to demand a price for gold. And so it has a tendency to keep inflation high. And if you go back to, if you study economic history from the 18 teens all the way up to the 1930s, eventually when the economy completely collapses, it's like a 15-year cycle of the economy flourishing for maybe 8 to 10 years, and then a 5-year down period. And so we had these huge swings of upticks of the economy and downturns of the economy, and not just little downturns of the economy, entire crashes. Each economic depression, there were like 6 of them, from the 18 teens up to 1930, got worse and worse and worse. And by the 1930s, it was a complete collapse of the economy. So it was seen as a way of us being able to control the value of the dollar and to make it stable. So you can relatively be assured that a dollar in your pocket is going to be worth a dollar next year, right? And so on and so forth. And inflation is maybe going to rise 1 to 2% every couple of years. That's at least the theory. Doesn't always happen, but that was the idea of that. Benjamin Harris, the Republican Party, supported the force bill, right? So again, the Republicans are championing federal protection of Black voting rights in the South, right? So again, it's different back then, and it switches by the time we get to the 1980s. James Weaver, the populist, is bimetallism, right? He wants a 16-to-1 ratio of gold versus silver. So silver is in the economy, so people can have more money in their pocket for purchasing power. And he advocated, again, as you guys pointed out, public ownership of railroads, telegraphs, and eventually telephones. That's not going to work out, but that's what they're advocating for. And a graduated income tax, right? So back then, there's no income tax. We will get the income tax in 1916 with the 17th Amendment, right? And this was a way to get away from high tariffs and to begin for the federal government to provide services and protection for workers and consumers. And also as a mechanism to break up the high concentration of wealth, right? So you can tax millionaires and billionaires at a higher tax rate and redistribute some of that wealth to the working class who are generating that wealth. And
It's funny that's still going on.
yeah, it's an age-old story, and it's an age-old fight that we're very much currently engaged in. And one thing James Weaver proposed was a postal savings bank, right? So at the post office, you would have a people's bank, right? And so it would be a bank that would be for nonprofit. And so there would be no services or fees, and it would be very easy. It would be a local place that you can trust. You would know the person that was running it. And it was nothing that ever took off in this country, but it was something that was very popular and people who were part of the Populist Party were very much in favor of it, right? So, the Populist Party very much reminds me of the Bernie Sanders movement, right? And so, Bernie Sanders, it was sort of the equivalent of Bernie Sanders advocating for universal health care, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people wanted that, and the powerful interest of the country, both Democrats and Republicans, no way, because that would destroy an entire industry, right? And it's true back then, the Democrats and the Republicans have their different issues, but they both are basically in there to support the interest of the wealthy class. And indeed, they're just, back then there's no, literally people are just getting bribed, right? We have bribes now, but it's all kind of convoluted in law, right? You can't just outright give a politician a bunch of money. You can give it to his campaign, and then it's sort of a message like, I'm going to give you a lot of money for your campaign, and then you'll do me favors later. But it's a change. Another guy that ran too during this election was a guy named John Bidwell, who's actually he came from the town I grew up in, Chico, California. And so his positions were prohibition of alcohol, women's suffrage, public education, and public ownership of railroads, right? So make sure you have those kinds of details when you're talking about the election of 1892. And then also, again, review the video for more details as you're preparing for a question like that. Okay, let's go to group 1 and the election of 1896. I'm going to put this in the chat. I'll break it up into pieces since it doesn't like to have too many words in it. Here's the question and the response. Oh, that was too many questions. Too many words for that. Okay. And the panic, yeah, there's some good stuff here. Okay. Okay, so that's in the chat. So election of 1893, William McKinley, the Republican, William Jennings Bryan, the Democratic populist. And this is interesting. This is kind of the beginning of the real beginning of the Democratic Party becoming becoming a liberal party. It's the seeds of it, right? It's not really going to become an absolute liberal party, but William Jennings Bryan, definitely, he was a populist, and he's going to attempt to influence the Democratic Party to bring it to its populist roots, to actually represent the working class. So Bryan believed in the bimetallic use of both silver and gold, and the ratio of silver to gold should be 16:1, he argued. Bryan was trying to alleviate the economic struggles that farmers and debtors were having, especially after the difficulties in 1893. So yeah, good detail there. And be specific, what the 1893, the economy crashes, right? And so this is a very vibrant election. They had a huge turnout for this election because of this downturn in the economy. McKinley believed in the gold standard that and would increase tariffs up to 25% for economic stability, prosperity to support the industry. So again, he's arguing this will promote support industry. And not to get in too much detail, but the problem with high tariffs to support American industries, at least historically speaking, this happens in spades in the 1920s, is that it's sort of like eating a candy bar and going to work out, right? You might have about 15-20 minutes of working out really hard, but then you're going to have a big sugar crash. And that's what happens, historically speaking, at least. Maybe things can change with high tariffs, but every time this happens, what happens is that it gives industry kind of false confidence, because yeah, you don't have Chinese goods, British goods, Mexican goods, right? So American business doesn't have to compete as much as it used to. And the lifeblood of capitalism is competition for many reasons. And so the quality of the product begins to decline. Since there's not that much competition for consumers, prices begin to go up. And since foreign companies aren't going to invest and try to open up, maybe businesses within the United States because of these high tariffs, then they begin to leave, and the availability of employment begins to decline and wages begin to go down. And so, but because for maybe a couple of years, there is an uptick in productivity and profits, then employers begin to go, oh, times are good, high tariffs are working. And so they begin to open up new factories, warehouses, begin to hire a bunch of people. But slowly the effects of that tariff, higher prices begin to happen, lower wages begin to happen. Then because of that overconfidence, then all of a sudden the employers look at the books and going, oh, we're losing profit, we need to lay off workers. And then they begin to lay off workers, and it doesn't work. Now you have a lot less people with purchasing power, and so it only causes more problems. And so then the employers go, oh, we're losing more money, let's lay off more workers. And the problem kind of becomes a downward spiral, and things go from bad to worse, right? This is exactly what's going to happen in the 1920s, leading to the Great Depression. The Panic of 1893 had caused significant unemployment. Many farmers were highly in debt, and they believed, in the moral flexible currency system would help them repay loans. Another significant event was the economic depression, right? That's the Panic of 18. They called depressions panics back then. Economic depression, populism, the populist movement led by farmers and their allies. Yeah, and again, it was biracial. And political dynamics. The end of the populist movement, Bryan's defeat in 1896 marked the collapse of the populist movement, although it would later resurface in American history. Specifically when? When would it resurface?
I want to say the next campaign because they go into the Democrat.
Well, the Republicans are going to, so jot this down in your notes. The Populist Party is going to lead to the Progressive Era, which is going to come pretty soon after this election, right? It's going to come in the Progressive Era begins in 1901. So McKinley becomes president and he gets assassinated by an anarchist. And his vice president, who is Teddy Roosevelt, who is a different type of Republican. He's a very more liberal Republican. And he's going to, the first thing he's going to do is go after the monopolies. And this kind of initiates the Progressive Era and signals to a lot of community leaders, labor organizers, women suffragists, that the time is now. And so there's this frenzy of citizen participation in the body politic, and a lot of reforms happen as a result. It ends in 1917 prematurely because of World War I, right? So World War I kind of, because everyone's focused on the war, right? We got bigger problems than focusing on women's rights or workers' rights and all of that kind of stuff. And so the war is over, and the American public, definitely the American political class, forgets about the Progressive Era. And because the war generated a lot of wealth, the economy kind of booms in the early 1920s, but all is not well. And by the mid 1920s, there are signs that the economy is not doing well. And by the time we get to 1929, the stock market crashes and we're in the Great Depression. And by 1931, 1932, we have 25% unemployment as an average across the country, which is really scary, right? I mean, American policymakers get worried when it rises up about 8 to 9%. 25% is insane, right? These are the seeds of a revolution. Whether and during the Great Depression, it was a real possibility that we were either going to have a communist revolution or a fascist revolution. And one of the reasons why FDR is considered one of the greatest presidents is he basically, during the New Deal, tried to find the attributes, the virtues of capitalism and socialism, and put them together to make a more vibrant society where it also worked not only for the capitalists, but for the working class as well. Okay. The election was marked at the end of the era of Reconstruction era and the Gilded Age, right? And yeah, this is leading, again, the end of the Gilded Age is leading to the Progressive Era, right? The triumph of the industrial capitalism, the gold standard. This was the first modern campaign. William McKinley, Republican, won the election of 271 electoral votes, and William Jennings Bryan, the Democrat populist, received 176. Okay, let's see here real quick. Is there anything else to add here? This is group 1, 1896. Let's see here. You guys covered quite a bit here, so excellent. Let me just scan through my notes real quick. The global context of the 19th century was marked by the expansion of European empires, increasing international trade. Okay. Yeah, you guys pretty much got, let's see, the Panic of 1893 and ensuing economic depression significantly impacted the election. The depression marked by bank failures. Yeah, a lot of banks are failing. I think up to 25% of banks were failing during this time period. Business closures, widespread unemployment created a climate of economic anxiety and discontent, right? Yeah, this is the height of the Gilded Age, the height of the robber barons age, where revolution is afoot during this time. This discontent fueled support for bimetallism and Bryan's populist message, as many blamed the gold standard for their economic woes, right? And so an interesting question of why the Republicans are going to win. Think about who can vote back then. Only white men, right? So even though black men have been given the vote, by then, and originally black men would gravitate in the 1860s, 1870s, even up to the 1880s towards the Republican Party, and many still would, because the Republicans were the party that created the Civil Rights Act and the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment and the Freedmen Bureau and all of that. But a lot of Black voters are also getting involved at this time with the Populist Party. But think about what's going on during this time period. By the 1890s, many Black people aren't voting anymore because of white supremacy and the terrorism that went with it. Lynchings were rampant and there were no consequences for it. And lynchings typically happened around Election Day. Even though poor white men can work or can vote, it's difficult to vote, right? It's only on a Tuesday, and back then you didn't have early voting and all of that kind of stuff. And so people who would normally vote for a party that's championing working rights just can't get to the polls to vote on time. Their backs are up against the wall, right? And many of them, are just trying to get food on the table, and trying to set aside some time to worry about politics is just not in the cards. So it's kind of an age-old problem in politics in a democratic society. Those that do vote are typically able to vote because they've got leisure time, they've got the resources, and their backs aren't up against the wall, so they have time to think about these issues. And it, in the end, hurts the working class. Okay, we're running out of time, so I don't want to keep you guys late, and I'm an old man, so it's getting close to my bedtime. But what I think I will do here is, hold on a second. I'm going to give you guys notes on the question on social Darwinism. So you have that. There's a lot of details to social Darwinism. And so the skinny on social Darwinism is the Industrial Revolution, the age of the robber barons. Poverty is rampant. And so how to explain poverty in a country with massive amounts of wealth, right? And so social Darwinism is not Darwinism. Darwinism is from Charles Darwin, from his 1859 Origins of the Species. He was trying to provide an explanation of why there were so many variety of species, and he provides a pretty elegant explanation, and he explains it over millions of years, geological time, billions of years that led to that. Well, thinkers, thought leaders, philosophers of a conservative bent grab the ideas of changing of species to society and individuals within society. And social Darwinism was a way of justifying poverty. And so the Industrial Revolution is the beginning of more and more people living in urban areas and less people living in rural areas. And the Industrial Revolution changes everything about being human, right? And so prior to the Industrial Revolution, many Americans owned farms or had at least access to land. Maybe they rented land. And so you could grow your own food, raise livestock, right? And maybe you had a parcel of land that you could use for commercial purposes, right? To grow a crop and to sell it to make cash, right? But if your crops failed or the market crashed for the crop you're growing and you didn't get as much money, you weren't going to starve, right? You're growing your own food, you know how to do it, you're self-reliant. What the Industrial Revolution does is it makes people not self-reliant and makes them economically interdependent. We become interdependent on forces way outside of our control. And so we all got a taste of this during the pandemic when during the lockdowns, when supply chains were disrupted, right? Mm-hmm. Walked into HEB and there's no food out there. Whose fault was that? That was not your fault. That wasn't my fault, right? People got laid off. That wasn't their fault. It was conditions way out of their control, right? And then since we've been in the industrial age for 120 years, even if you have the skill set to farm and raise livestock, there's city ordinance against some of those things. And so it's not like people can be self-reliant. And yeah, most people don't even have that skill set. That's a very specific skill set that is passed down from generation to generation, and we don't have it anymore. So the environment is changing to an industrial-based environment. And so people began to go, oh, people like Herbert Spencer, who was a philosopher that promoted social Darwinism. He basically said that what's happening is that the weak, the undeserving, the poor are dying in the industrial age. And this is basically an indication from God or the law of nature that they're not fit for this new environment. And so we shouldn't help those people out, because if we help those people out, they'll pass on their genes to the next generation, and we'll have a bunch of more poor people who are inadequate in this new environment. What we want to do is to make sure that the fittest survive and they pass on their genetic information of being fit to the next generation, and we'll have these great Americans, right? This is nonsense. It's not based on science whatsoever. It's just him thinking of how to justify poverty. But it becomes the ethos of the day. And it really, not of working class people, but of people in Washington, the robber barons. And it's a way of them to basically sleep at night while people are dying out in the streets and in factories, and not making enough money, and basically living these entirely miserable lives, not fit for the living. So let me share this with you. You're going to see there's a lot of details in it. It goes into ideas of limited government, justifications for inequality, the emphasis on the individual, and that's key too. So certainly there's a case for personal responsibility in any economic system, but in the industrial age, the systems that are developing have taken local economies and are beginning to globalize them. And so again, we don't have control over that. And so if you get laid off, that has nothing to do with you being a drunkard or lazy. It has to do with economic forces that have nothing to do with you. So poverty is being pathologized, right? It's being seen almost as a disease, as a shortcoming of a person. Definitely opposition of labor movements and influence of court decisions. One key court decision is the Lochner versus New York, and it's getting late, so I won't go into it, but I'm going to share these notes with you so you have them, since you all are here and are putting up with all of this yammering that I am doing. So there's the notes, and oops, hold on. Let me make sure it's shareable. Okay. Okay, now it is shareable. So you have those notes there. And yeah, let's adjourn. I was hoping to get done by 9:30, but sorry about that. You guys have a good night. I can address any questions if anybody has any questions. But if you're ready to get out of here, you can take off. But do ask questions if you have any questions.
With all the information, how do we know, how do we go about with the questions on the assessments?
So yeah, good question. So the thing that I keep reiterating in announcements and from the orientation is, okay, here we go, is to really take the time when you open up an interactive book to leverage the key points, right? Okay. So it's just giving you some general information about what you're reading there. So transformation of the American working class workforce from rural to urban areas between 1865 and 1900s. What I highly suggest doing, it takes maybe a minute or 2 minutes, is write those down. Don't just look at them or copy and paste them. Write them down, because then you'll become aware of what it is more aware of what it is you're about to read. And then you have a notebook, you write that down, and then take notes based on that. So what does that look like? What did this transformation of the workforce look like, right? The reading and the videos are going to give you more details about that, right? They're going to talk about individuals or certain locations where the workforce is being transformed, and what this means, the implications of it moving from the rural to the urban areas, right? The text is going to tell you about that.
Okay.
So that is what you want to do. The other thing that I highly encourage students to do is you really want to, and many, perhaps you guys are doing this already, but and I realize you guys are busy, right? Many, especially online students, you're taking online courses because you have a family and you're working. And so the idea of setting aside hours to study is just not in the cards. But what you can do is every day dedicate 30 minutes a day, and that could be broken up, right? That could be broken up in the morning and the evening, 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes at night. And these interactive books will stop, they'll leave off where you stop, right?
Yep.
So that works that way. And then that's not sufficient, right? So you also want to go, okay, where do I have within my week where I could actually spend a couple of hours? So have at least 2 days a week where you could spend an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and you could break that up into chunks as well. And so the point is just to be consistent and not to go, okay, the short answer assessment is due in a few days. Now I'm going to start taking notes. You want to take notes as you go. So, a tendency for students is to go, okay, I'm at the course, so I'll go through this, and now I can take the quiz, and boom, 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 drag the words, boom, boom, boom. Okay, move on to the next thing. What I would highly suggest is, as you're reading the text, before you get to the quiz and drag the words, take your notes before you even do that, right? And do that in pockets of 10, 15 minutes, whatever it works for you, in the morning, in the afternoon, whatever, at night. That's how you're going to go about it.
Well, I try not to rewrite the book, and my husband always tells me I rewrite the book.
That's a good start, right? That's a good start. And the benefit of being consistent, having a daily schedule, is then you can go back to your notes, because a lot, and this is perfectly normal. You might write down a bunch of words and you go, I have no idea what this means. But the next day when you go back to your notes,
I add notes
because you've slept. So you put your notes away, you wake up, okay, I'm gonna look at my notes again, go over the readings, and then you might have some aha moments. And that's where you can begin to maybe write the stuff in your own words.
Okay.
Right? So that's the virtue of having a very consistent schedule. And when you just do the assignments and go, okay, a couple of days before the assessment, that's when I'm going to start studying. Then all of this stuff just looks like Greek to you, right? So the consistent schedule is going to be very helpful. The other thing to keep in mind, it's not zero sum. When what I mean by that, it's not like you're either going to get an A or an F, right? And so even if you are getting a high 70%, a low 80% per question, and you've done really good on all the interactive books, like 90 to 100%, that's probably going to be sufficient to get you an 85% or higher on each unit.
Okay.
Right. So, because that can be real discouraging, right? You're just thinking, oh, if I don't get an A, then I fail. Well, do what you can, and just with the idea of, oh, this guy, me, the teacher here, wants me to have dates. He wants me to have individuals. So jot that down. You're probably not going to get everything, but it doesn't, in the end, your grade will still be benefit if you have some details in there, right? If you have very little details, that's where you're going to get below a 35, sometimes even much lower. If you have some details and those details are going to put you on track of writing 3, 5, 6, 7 sentences, right? And that's what I'm going to notice. And do keep in mind, you do get extra credit if you finish early on these units. So if you finish early, meaning you've completed most of the interactive assignments and you've completed the short answer assessment, that gives you 5% extra credit. And you got to let me know, hey, I finished it early, and then I'll grade it. And you have to let me know on pronto so you can get that 5%, because I'm not going to go back once everybody is graded and going, okay, did that person get it early? Right. You want to help me save time on my end so I can get you that extra credit.
Everything being done, is that including the assessment?
It's going to be very difficult to get to the 75% threshold without doing, because you have to earn a 75% or
Right.
higher and complete the unit early to get the 5% extra credit. Without doing the short answer assessment, you're not going to get a 75%.
Okay.
So, but don't put too much pressure on yourself to get it done early, but know that that's an incentive to where you can get your grade boosted. And then keep in mind, 85% on all of the units, no final exam, which will make the end of the semester a lot less stressful. So then you can concentrate on other final exams from other instructors who aren't as cool as me that are going to make you do the final exam. Okay, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, and basically, hey, if you earn 85% or higher, my thinking is, yeah, you don't need to do the final exam. Students that didn't, it's like, yeah, you need to do the final exam because now you need to go back to learn this stuff. So that's kind of my thinking on that.
So we have to get the 85% on the short answer, like the unit, the
No,
whole
for each unit. So look at your unit grade, and you
Mhm.
want that to be an 85%. So
Okay,
unit
the
1 needs to
unit.
be an 85%, unit 2, so on and so forth until you've
So
done
like
all.
say we got like a 70 on the short answer, but our grade's still higher, like the unit 1. So it's not just the short answer
No, it's
grade.
the unit grade.
Everything.
Yeah, whatever the unit grade is, if it's 85% or higher, that's, and you get all 85% or higher on all the units, then you don't have to do the final exam.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, keep that in mind going forward. And you can go back, and if you happen to need another attempt at a short answer assessment, get a hold of me and I'll open up another attempt for you. So just if you got a low grade on the short answer assessment and your unit 1 grade is below an 85%, well, just think, okay, I'm gonna every once in a while go back to reconstruction, develop my notes so I can get a higher grade on the short answer assessment, and kind of think that way as you're going through the semester. Okay, any other questions? No? All right.
No.
Okay.
Are you
Well,
gonna
thank-
post the, oh, sorry. Are you gonna post the social door